Chapter 270. The orc army began to crumble. With the charge of 2,000 knights and all kinds of spells from the wizards, the orcs finally couldn't hold on any longer. In fact, the human army had also reached their limit. In fact, if it wasn't for Sulen defeating the orcs in the back and forcing the orcs to send out another 10,000 men to stabilize the rear, this battle would have continued for a while. Now that they had lost 10,000 men, the orcs were clearly not strong enough. As time passed, the humans' attacks became stronger and stronger, and the orcs' counterattack became weaker and weaker. The army was collapsing like a mountain. At the same time, the battle between Marquis Winter and Raucus had reached the most critical moment. "Ha ha ha, did you see that? Your orc army has been defeated. If you surrender now, I can consider letting you live." Marquis Winter laughed as he saw the orc army crumbling. He looked a bit miserable right now. Although the wound on his chest was no longer bleeding, his fighting power had decreased a lot. "Really? As long as I kill you, the human army will lose their commander, and the orcs will be able to turn the tide," Raucus said coldly. "Raucus, I admit that you are very powerful. I am not your opponent, but it won't be that easy for you to kill me." Marquis Winter's face slightly changed. At this time, a terrifying power suddenly emerged from Rogessus's body. A blood-red radiance seemed to have materialized as it enveloped his body. Blood kill cut. The blood-red light quickly spread on his body and wrapped around the weapon in his hand. The dazzling blood-red light covered his vision, making him look like a red lightning bolt. A red light flashed across the sky. It looked like it teleported and directly appeared next to Winter. The giant axe in his hand left behind a series of afterimages as it slashed across. Everything happened so suddenly. Winter only made a few dodging gestures, but the giant axe had already swept past him. Everything in front of him was split apart. Raucus' speed was beyond human vision. In the next second, Marquis Winter was chopped in half by the giant axe. Plop! Went's tall body fell to the ground, and Raucus slowly got up. His breathing was very rapid, and his expression was very tired. The hand that was holding the giant axe was even slightly trembling. The back that was no longer bleeding ruptured again, and blood gushed out like a fountain. It was obvious that the attack just now had also caused him to suffer heavy injuries. "You've been raised for a long time, but you haven't experienced a battle of deep thought. You seem to have forgotten how to fight. Didn't your teacher tell you not to talk too much in battle?" Rogue thus raised Marquis Winter's head and said slowly, "Don't let your guard down until the battle is over." After killing Went, Rogas grabbed his head and roared, "Went is dead." The deafening sound instantly spread throughout the battlefield. Even in the chaotic and noisy battlefield, this sound could be heard clearly. The human army that was chasing after the orcs suddenly stopped when they heard this voice. "Don't believe his lies." At this moment, a gentle and deep voice sounded in their ears. The voice was like a spring breeze, making them involuntarily choose to believe him. "Continue to attack and drive these orcs out of our homeland." The hesitant human army no longer cared about anything else and continued to pursue the orcs. On the other side of the battlefield, a few figures in wizard robes looked at the chaotic army in front of them and said, "Durayon, luckily you made a move in time. It's just a pity about Marquis Winter." A wizard in a red robe next to them said with pity. When they saw Marquis Winter die in battle, these wizards knew things were not going well. They immediately used a spell to amplify and hint to minimize the impact of Marquis Winter's death. Seeing that the human army did not collapse as he expected, and instead continued to chase after him, Raucus's face finally changed. However, the general situation of the battlefield could no longer be changed by him alone. If he was a legendary wizard, he could cast a powerful area of effect attack spell, then there would still be a chance. However, the only one who had this ability, the great shaman, was tightly entangled by the priest and several wizards. As long as he wanted to cast a powerful spell, those wizards would immediately counter it with spells. the great shaman couldn't do anything at all. Although Rogas killed the problem, he was also like an arrow at the end of its flight. How many people could he kill by himself? The entire battlefield was collapsing. The orcs had lost their momentum. Rogas took a look at Cult City and turned to leave. His body was not in a good condition, and he was severely injured. Sulan had legendary strength, but once the orcs were defeated, he would be surrounded by the humans. He knew things were not going to work out. Although he was extremely angry, he still chose to retreat. After making up his mind, Rogas thus led the orc army to retreat, while the humans chased after them. With Rogas thus leading the orc army did not collapse. As the orcs retreated, they left behind a large number of corpses, creating a horrifying scene. The human army also suffered heavy losses. In fact, if you only looked at the number of casualties, the human casualties were much higher than the orcs. The orcs left 30,000 corpses here, while the human casualties were as high as 50,000. In the following battle, the orcs left another 6,000 corpses and got rid of the humans. The human army did not continue to pursue. Winning this war was also very thrilling for the humans. Moreover, these soldiers were already tired from the journey and had experienced a fierce battle. If it were not for the support of the priests, these human soldiers would have been unable to hold on. After the orcs were defeated, some people could not hold on anymore. Therefore, the humans did not pursue the orcs. After the cruel battle, they also needed time to rest. However, in Cult City, some nobles did not intend to let go of this good opportunity. In the battle that just ended, these nobles did not go to the battlefield. They hid in the city and watched. Now that the orcs were defeated, these nobles finally had the courage to rush out of the city and pursue the orcs. After winning, the human army began to seize the time to reorganize. At the same time, the death of Marquis Winter cast a shadow over this victory. As the most important legendary figure of the Florentine royal family, his death greatly damaged the strength of the Florentine kingdom. At the same time, there was a slight deviation in the original balance. The Florentine kingdom was not dominated by the royal family alone. There were many nobles who had the right to inherit the throne. Among them, the three strongest electors were not as strong as the royal family, but they were not much weaker. In the past, the Florentine royal family had two legendary figures. Now, with Winter's death, they had lost their absolute advantage. The victory of the battle made the human army excited, but Winter's death was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue. A legendary powerhouse had died so easily in this battle. The next morning, the human army had an early breakfast and continued to pursue the orcs. Marquis Winter was still very popular in the army. Because of his death, many of the human army shouted for revenge and began to counterattack the orcs. In addition, since the start of the battle, the humans had lost more than 100,000 soldiers and the hatred between both sides was very deep. The orcs were not any better. Including the orcs killed by Sulan, they lost 50,000 to 60,000 people in this battle. The remaining soldiers were basically all injured and their morale was low. But fortunately, the orcs left 10,000 orc soldiers in the rear camp in advance. With the addition of these fresh troops, the orcs did not collapse all the way. In fact, due to the reluctance of the nobles in Cult City, the orcs seized the opportunity and launched an ambush. After the battle, the soldiers of the nobles in Cult City suffered heavy casualties. If it weren't for the arrival of the human army, the nobles in Cult City might not have been able to return alive. After being ambushed by the orcs, the nobles finally behaved themselves. With the addition of the 10,000 orcs, the human army stopped pressing the orcs in order to avoid more casualties. However, the humans still had the advantage. After the orcs retreated, the human army began to occupy the cities that were previously occupied by the orcs, as well as the gold, silver, and jewelry that the orcs plundered. In order to speed up their retreat, the orcs didn't bring the valuables with them. Instead, they only transported the food that they plundered. The large amount of wealth made the generals jealous. According to the original plan, the nobles who abandoned the cities and fled would be stripped of their territories and redistributed to the generals who had contributed to the kingdom to increase the strength of the royal family. However, this would definitely be opposed by the original nobles. This resulted in the conflict between the Kingdom of Florence's army and the Kingdom of Florence's army constantly recovering the lost territories. Su Len wasn't concerned about the conflict between the Kingdom of Florence's army. Instead, he was paying attention to the orcs. After the orcs suffered heavy losses, they retreated all the way to the north. As they brought along large amounts of food, the orcs retreated slowly. Other than the difficulty of surviving in the northern wilderness, the orcs also launched this war to obtain large amounts of food. In the beginning, the orcs still had thoughts of occupying this place. However, after this huge defeat, that thought disappeared completely. Now, their plan was to snatch enough food to return to their homeland. In order to transport the food back, Rogus personally led his men to buy time. Sullen's target this time was this orc chieftain. The orc chieftain was severely injured in the previous battle and had yet to recover. In the last battle, Su Luan obtained a legendary skill point and a lot of good things from the platinum treasure chest. This time, if he could kill Rogexus, he would at least get a platinum treasure chest. This level of things couldn't be obtained so easily. Chapter 271. At night, there was not a single ray of light in the sky. Even the stars were covered by thick dark clouds. Bonfires had already been lit up in the orc camp. More than 5,000 orcs were led by Rogessus to cover the rear. At this moment, Rogessus was feeling a little uneasy in his simple tent. Although they had suffered heavy losses in this attack on the human kingdom, the food they had obtained was enough to feed the entire tribe for a year or two. They had also killed a legendary human figure, which made the enemies behind them feel a lingering fear. Without a legendary figure chasing after them, Rogathus didn't put the humans in his eyes. However, he was feeling very restless tonight. About 10 kilometers away from the orc camp, Su Len was observing the movements of the orcs through the strategic map. Among the red marks, there was a purple mark. It was the orc chieftain Rogathus. Time slowly passed. When he turned on the magic clock, it was already 2:00 in the morning. This was the time when the orcs were sleeping the most, and also the time when they were most vulnerable to sneak attacks. Let's begin. Su Len looked at the time and said to Alex. Alex was already prepared. Under her command, the harpies that were resting in the trees immediately woke up and flew towards the orc camp under her lead. These harpies had lived in the underground world for a long time, so they had night vision. They were completely unaffected in this kind of dark night. 3,000 harpies flew into the sky under Alex's lead. They then identified the direction and flew towards the orc camp. After the harpies set off, Su Len also led the rest of the troops and began to move. In order to deal with these orcs, Su Len had brought more than half of the northern city's army. It wasn't easy for an army to march in the dark. Luckily, many of the northern city's soldiers had night vision, which greatly reduced the difficulty of marching. Under the effect of magic, the sound of thousands of soldiers marching was minimized. The northern city's army wasn't slow at all. It only took them 10 minutes to cover the distance of 10 kilometers. Just as they arrived, the harpies launched their first wave of attack. 3,000 harpies flew to the sky above the orc camp. Then, a large number of simple incendiary bombs filled with kerosene, charcoal, and white sugar fell from the sky. These incendiary bombs shattered when they hit the ground, and the kerosene inside them rose up to a meter high. This kerosene had charcoal and white sugar added to it, so it was very sticky. Kerosene splattered everywhere and ignited the surrounding tents. The sleeping orcs were startled awake, and those who were slow to react were quickly engulfed in flames and burned to ashes. A large number of Molotov cocktails fell from the sky like a meteor shower, filling the sky with flames. Su Len gave each of the harpies 10 Molotov cocktails. The 30,000 Molotov cocktails consumed all the kerosene in Northgard City. Even more than half of the white sugar produced this month had been consumed. However, the effect was very good. Many beastmen woke up and tried to put out the fire, but they quickly discovered that these flames weren't ordinary flames. Many beastmen who were infected by these flames kept rolling on the ground, trying to put out the fire, but the result was that the flames spread all over their bodies. A few beastmen who wanted to help were also caught by the flames when they approached, scaring them into running away. A large number of beastmen screamed and frantically tried to put out the fire. In the end, in just a few breaths, these beastmen were turned into human-shaped torches. The entire camp was completely engulfed in a sea of fire. More than 30,000 Molotov cocktails were quickly thrown down. The harpies who had completed their mission began to evacuate under Alex's lead. Rogthus was awakened by the noise outside. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the entire camp was engulfed in flames. Seeing this situation, Rogthus made a prompt decision and immediately led his people to rush out of the camp. As soon as they arrived at the camp, they saw a group of well-equipped soldiers waiting outside. The flames in the camp were constantly burning. There weren't many options left for them. If they didn't want to be burned to death, they could only rush out. Despicable humans, I'm going to kill you. A large number of orcs were burned to ashes in the flames. Rogthus' eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. When he saw the humans blocking his way, he roared and rushed out with the rest of the orcs. Archers. Rain of arrows. Seeing the orcs rushing up, Sulen didn't have any expression and directly ordered. The archers of the northern city immediately started shooting at the front gate of the camp. Arrows rained down from the sky. Because these orcs were under fire attack, they didn't wear any protective gear. Facing this kind of dense rain of arrows, they simply couldn't resist. When the rain of arrows fell, a large number of orcs were directly shot into hedgehogs. Only a few powerful orcs relied on their weapons to deflect the arrows. The orcs who rushed out of the camp suffered heavy casualties in an instant. After that, the archers didn't stop and continued to shoot. Although it wasn't as dense as before, it was still continuous. After a short while, hundreds of orcs fell on the path of the charge. When Rogthus saw a large number of orcs being shot to death, his eyes were completely bloodshot. His expression was ferocious like a crazy beast. He lightly covered his eyes with his arm and completely ignored the rain of arrows in the sky. He then accelerated and rushed towards the army of the northern city. Sullen's hand shook, and the purple dragon halberd suddenly appeared. In the next second, his figure appeared at the front of the army. Facing this kind of legend rank expert, even if he was injured and couldn't use his full strength, it was still not something that could be stopped by anyone below legend rank. If he rushed in, the army of the northern city would definitely suffer heavy losses. Lightning constantly jumped on his body, and there were also large amounts of lightning arcs jumping on the purple dragon halberd. As he continued to move forward, the lightning became more and more intense. Legend rank. Seeing Sullen's performance, Rogthus's scarlet eyes slightly shrank. He didn't expect the humans to send another legend rank expert so quickly. This caught him a little off guard. If he was in his peak state, he wouldn't be afraid of any legend rank expert. However, with his current combat power, it was hard to say who would win against this legend rank expert. So what if you are a legend rank expert? If I can kill Went, I can also kill you. Seeing the lightning flashing on Sullen's body, Rogthus roared and then accelerated towards Sulen. As Rogthus roared, he actually directly waved his giant axe and cut open a wound on his body. Then, scarlet blood gushed out from his body. As if it contained some kind of powerful magic, after the blood appeared, it burned like kerosene. Rogthus looked at Sulen with a crazy expression. The flames on his body were naturally not real flames, but they were much more powerful than real flames. Blood flame. It was said that only some strong people could use this powerful skill. This skill could provide a large amount of power for a short period of time, but the side effect was also very strong. This was a kind of power that burned one's life. Every second consumed one's life. Although the lifespan of a legend rank expert was several times that of an ordinary person, very few people would use this skill. However, for Rogthus, he had no choice but to use it. If he didn't use it today, then it was very likely that he would never be able to use it again. Since that was the case, he would naturally use it to fight with his life. If he failed, then everything would be over. If he won, then naturally it would be better. The red blood flame wrapped his whole body, and even his weapon was wrapped in a layer of blood flame. In this case, Rogthus naturally wouldn't waste time. He charged towards Sulen. Seeing the orc charging towards him, Sulen didn't hesitate. A powerful lightning energy emerged from his body. Thunder Domain. Strong lightning exploded and directly lit up the night sky. Sulen's body was completely wrapped in lightning energy. He really looked like the god of thunder from legends. Facing the orc charging towards him, Sulen was not afraid. He directly moved his body and rushed forward. He couldn't dodge. Once he dodged, Rogthus would rush into the army of the northern city. With his blood flame activated, all the soldiers of the northern city were no match for him. At that time, even if he killed Rogthus, the army of the northern city would also suffer heavy losses. The crazy fighting spirit combined with his huge body and the power of a legend rank expert allowed him to deal crushing damage to any enemy below the legend rank. With the support of the blood flame, he was confident that he could kill that human with one strike. Boom! The millstone-sized axe was swung by him as if it was weightless. He directly chopped towards Sulen's head. It was a simple move, but it gave people a feeling that it was impossible to dodge. Sulen's halberd swept around, and a powerful lightning energy appeared in an instant. A huge rumbling sound was heard as Sulen firmly blocked Rogthus' attack. Every orc that reached the legend rank was a master of battle. Their experience of reaching the legend rank step by step moved even Sulen. These orcs had killed their way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Whirlwind slash. Red blood flame appeared on Rogthus' axe. It was like a huge burning torch. The sharp edge of the blade was hidden in the fire, and it directly chopped towards Sulen's head. Lightning weapon. The originally powerful lightning energy suddenly exploded. The lightning energy within Sulen's body crazily revolved. At this time, the purple dragon halberd was completely wrapped in lightning. In the next second, the two weapons collided once again. Bang! 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 War roar. Sulen roared, and the sound instantly exploded. The soldiers near the battlefield felt their vision turn black, and their ears were ringing. They felt dizzy, and it took them a few seconds to recover. Rogthus, who was the closest to the battlefield, was the one who suffered the most damage. His body stiffened. Sulen's long spear swept horizontally, and directly deflected the axe away. He then slashed a terrifying wound on the opponent's chest. Chapter 272. Sulen's halberd swept across and left a bloody wound on Rogthus' chest. The fine armor on Rogthus' body was cut open without any resistance. His tough skin was also cut open. Even the blood flame on his body was cut open, but it recovered in a breath's time. Bolts of thunder and lightning jumped on Sulen's body and weapons. A rolling thundercloud had appeared in the sky, and bursts of thunder came from the sky. Rogthus looked at the thunder clouds with fear. His eyes were filled with blood light. The injury made him even crazier. Roar! There was a flash of blood, and the blood flames on his body surged once again. The giant axe in his hand slashed down with a sharp whistle. Originally, the physical quality of the orcs was very high, and they could easily suppress warriors of the same rank. Coupled with the skills they had honed through countless life and death battles, this orc chieftain was also a powerhouse in the legendary rank. Whirlwind Slash. Roges's giant axe was wrapped in a layer of blood-red flame. The sharp edge of the axe was hidden in the flame. It was fiercely chopping towards Sullen's head. The entire space seemed to be within the attack range of the giant axe. Sullen's eyes flashed. Facing Roges's attack, his body seemed to have already predicted the trajectory of the giant axe. He dodged it by a hair's breadth. Roges's full-strength attack did not hit the enemy, and it directly hit the ground. Naturally, it was very difficult to change the trajectory of an attack with such ferocious strength. Moreover, it was very easy for an opening to appear in the next attack. Rogessus used his full strength to directly hit the ground. The giant axe directly split the ground with a loud rumble, leaving a deep gully in the ground. The surrounding ground became a complete mess. Sullen's body flashed, and he had already arrived at Rogessus' side. He then fiercely waved his halberd. The halberd drew an arc and fiercely stabbed towards Rogessus' back. If this attack hit, the purple dragon halberd could easily pierce through his heart. Moreover, the lightning power on it would destroy all of Rogessus' internal organs. Sensing the danger, Rogessus' body directly rolled forward due to the inertia brought by the giant axe. The purple dragon halberd only left a wound on his back. Feeling the pain from his back, Rogessus roared and instantly pulled back the axe in his hand. The axe carried an imposing aura as it fiercely chopped down. Spinning slash. Sulen immediately stopped his pursuit. He held his halberd horizontally in front of him. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang out. Su Luan felt a huge force coming from the weapon. In fact, in this kind of head-on battle, heavy weapons had a clear advantage. Although the great axe was a common weapon, there weren't many people who could use it well. Many people were full of flaws when using it. When facing a rapier or other agile weapon, they often couldn't hit their opponents, or their opponents would seize the opportunity to counterattack. However, the orc chieftain in front of him had already mastered the great axe to the point of perfection. Even Boulder and Johnson were slightly inferior to him in this aspect. His attacks were powerful and heavy, and he didn't have the sluggishness of a heavy weapon. His movements were quick, and he didn't give you a chance to counterattack. Stab! After blocking Rogessus' heavy attack, Sullen's expression didn't change at all. Countless streaks of lightning enveloped him, and these streaks of lightning would injure anyone near him. For example, Rogessus would be attacked by the streaks of lightning in the air every second. If an ordinary person was in this kind of environment, their body would be paralyzed by the streaks of lightning, and they wouldn't be able to move. However, these injuries didn't have much effect on Rogessus. Most of these attacks were blocked by the layer of blood flames on his body. The purple dragon halberd pierced towards Rogessus with a streak of lightning. The orc chieftain raised his great axe like a shield, and the broad surface of the axe directly blocked half of his body. Sparks flew everywhere as the purple dragon halberd and the great axe collided. A huge force was transmitted, and the two of them couldn't help but retreat. Sulen took a step back and stabilized his body. Then, he rushed towards the orc chieftain again. Rogessus was pushed back 5 or 6 steps by this huge force. When he saw Sulen rushing towards him again, his eyes flashed with a fierce light. He roared and ignored the purple dragon halberd that was pointed at his chest. The great axe in his hand spun around and chopped towards Sulen's head. Su Luan frowned slightly when he saw that Rogessus was going to perish together with Su Luan. Although he was confident that he could stab Rogessus in the chest before his attack arrived, there was only a 30% chance that he could dodge the axe. Su Luan didn't want to seriously injure Rogessus, who had long been regarded as a big EXP gift pack. Although he knew that this was Rogessus's plan, Sulen had no choice but to change his strategy. The purple dragon halberd was raised and blocked the great axe's attack. Rogessus's eyes flashed with a tyrannical light. The great axe in his hand drew an arc and chopped towards Sulen again. Sullen's halberd swept horizontally and blocked the attack again. Rogessus didn't care about it at all. He used the rebound force to increase the speed of the great axe in his hand. Clang! 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 A series of metallic sounds rang out. Rogessus' attacks were like a storm, getting faster and faster. The red flames on the giant axe kept spreading to the purple dragon halberd. However, as soon as it touched the halberd, it was torn apart by the powerful lightning power. Clang! Sullen's body flickered with lightning and blocked all of Rogessus's violent attacks. The orc chieftain's strength didn't have the slightest advantage in front of Sulen. In terms of agility, Sulen could easily leave him in the dust. Even with the legendary physique, Sulen couldn't hold on for long under Rogessus's powerful attacks. Soon, Sulen felt that the strength in his hands had weakened, and the frequency of his attacks was no longer increasing. Sensing the weakening of his attacks, Sullen's pent-up anger instantly exploded. Just a moment ago, he was suppressed by Rogessus, who had gone berserk. After a short burst of power, he became weak. Rogessus's attack just now could seriously injure a legend with lower strength. If they were unlucky, it wouldn't be surprising if they were killed. Heroic! Powerful lightning instantly burst out from Sullen's body. The purple dragon halberd in his hand became a weapon made of lightning. The lightning swept across and directly sent Rogessus flying. It also left a charred wound on his chest. Countless lightning snakes burst out from his body. It was as if he was being pierced by thousands of steel needles. Damn human! The great pain made Rogessus's body tremble. Although Rogessus had already gone berserk, this state couldn't block out the pain. Suren's cold eyes didn't change in the slightest. The battlefield was filled with the desperate roars of the orcs. At this time, the whole camp had completely turned into a sea of fire. Barbarian warriors and heavy armored spearmen surrounded the whole camp. All the orcs that rushed out were killed by them. The archers in the back were constantly lighting arrows and then throwing them in. From afar, the orc camp looked like a huge bonfire. The roars of the orcs before they died made Rogessus even angrier. The blood flames on his body became more and more vigorous. This showed that he was burning more of his life force. In order to defeat Sulen, Rogessus didn't care about anything else. If this continued, even if he defeated Sulen, he would die because of the exhaustion of his life force at the end of the battle. But at this time, Rogessus had no other choice. Just when he was about to burst out again, Sullen's figure flashed and rushed up. Rogessus waved his axe and used the same move again. He wanted to use the same move as before. But this time, Sulen was already prepared. His body quickly moved around his attack and continued to attack from the side. Facing Sullen's sudden change of move, Rogessus also changed his move. But his speed was far from Sullen's rhythm. The sky was filled with lightning constantly flashing around Rogessus. The powerful electricity gathered and pierced through the blood flames on his body. Under the constant attack of the lightning, the blood flames on Rogessus' body were constantly scattered. Blood kill cut. In the face of Suren's rapid attacks, Rogessus was completely exhausted. He naturally understood that if he continued, it wouldn't be long before he would be exhausted to death. Seeing this situation, Rogessus made up his mind and once again used the move he used to kill Marquis Winter. A bloody light suddenly appeared. Rogessus completely ignored Sullen's attack. His body was like a red lightning bolt as he quickly rushed towards Sulen. How could Sulen, who had already seen this move, not be unprepared? Although the attack was sudden, he seemed to have predicted it in advance. His body instantly dodged. Sixth sense. The sixth sense that he had just obtained not long ago once again worked. He successfully dodged Rogessus' attack. Then, he exerted strength in his arms and twisted his waist. The purple dragon halberd swept towards Rogessus' chest. Although blood kill cut was fast, it was more of a straight line attack. It was impossible to dodge Sullen's attack. Then, the purple dragon halberd carried a powerful lightning power and instantly struck Roges's body. Roges's huge body flew backwards at an extremely fast speed. Sullen didn't stop. His body followed closely behind. The purple dragon halberd in his hand continuously struck at Roges's vital points. For a moment, several wounds appeared on Roges's body. The heavy axe chopped down, creating a crack that was more than a few meters deep in front of Sullen. Sullen, who had dodged the attack by sticking close to the edge of the axe, didn't hesitate at all. He exerted strength in his feet and directly moved his body a distance of nearly 5 meters. Silver Dragon Inversed Scales Spear. Sullen fiercely stomped on the ground, creating a crater on the ground beside him. Then, his body shot out like lightning. He rushed over from Roges's left side. The purple dragon halberd in his hand transformed into a silver dragon. The dragon's entire body was composed of lightning. It carried an indomitable aura as it pierced towards the enemy's heart. The threat of death came, causing all the hair on Roges's body to stand on end. His heart rapidly beat. When he saw the mighty move in front of him, a feeling of unstoppable welled up in his heart. In this situation where he couldn't dodge, Roges didn't dodge. He had made up his mind to give Sullen a ruthless blow even if he had to die. Bloody flames instantly gathered on the axe. Like a burning torch, it directly appeared in front of Sullen's path. Chapter 273. Sixth Sense. Time seemed to have stopped. At that moment, the thunder dragon swung its tail, and the purple dragon halberd's tail hit the giant axe with amazing skill. It directly swung the axe away, and then it rushed towards Roges without slowing down. Lightning exploded, and the lightning dragon directly pierced through Roges's body. All the lightning disappeared, and blood crazily gushed out. Roges's tall body stiffened on the spot, and in the next second, a powerful lightning exploded from his body. Countless electric snakes shot out from the orc chief's body. Then Roges's sturdy body fell down with a loud bang. Congratulations, host, you have successfully defeated the orc army. You have obtained an epic victory. Your name will spread throughout the human kingdom and the northern wasteland. Prestige plus 25. Annihilation of the orc army, August 1687 of the Huiyue calendar. The orcs in the north retreated. You led the army of the northern town to ambush the orc army in the stony wasteland. With the help of the harpy's flying ability, you launched a fire attack on the orc camp in the early morning. A large number of Molotov cocktails fell, and the orc camp was engulfed in a sea of fire. Under these circumstances, the orc chief tried to break out of the encirclement, but you were able to stop him. Moreover, during the battle, you were able to kill the orc chief Rogthus. You have been detected to have killed 2 legendary orcs. You have received the title Orc Terminator. Your relationship with the orcs has been reduced to mortal enemy. You have obtained the goodwill of the Kingdom of Florence. Your prestige in the Kingdom of Florence has been increased. Your relationship with the Kingdom of Florence has been raised to respected. Congratulations, host, you have successfully killed the orc chief Roges. You have obtained 34,850 EXP. You have obtained a platinum treasure chest. You have obtained a legend skill point. Congratulations, host, under your command, your army has successfully defeated the orc army. You have obtained 8,930 EXP. You have obtained 2 gold treasure chests. You have obtained the item Dark Iron. Congratulations, host, your EXP is full. You have leveled up. You are currently level 25. You have obtained 1 gold treasure chest. You have obtained 2 attribute points and 2 skill points. Ding! After a fierce battle, your weapon proficiency has increased. Your gun proficiency has reached 255. Beastman Terminator, title, Acquisition Requirements, automatically acquired after killing 2 legendary beastmen. After equipping this title, attacks against beastmen will be increased by 15%, deterrence towards beastmen +3, chance of beastmen escaping on the battlefield +3, chance of enraging beastmen. Following the fall of the orc Rogthus, Sullen's ears continuously rang with system notifications. This battle was still very risky for Sulen. After all, he didn't expect Rogesis to have the ability to burn his life force, which could greatly increase his combat power. As for the rest of the beastmen in the camp, they were all dead by now. After the Harpies' airstrike, the camp had turned into a sea of fire. Some of the beastmen were burned to death, while the rest died trying to break out of the encirclement. The camp was surrounded by the northern fortress city. The beastmen were no match for the elites of the northern fortress city. Even though they tried their best to break out, they still failed. "Sir, are you all right?" A guard came to Sullen's side and asked. "I'm fine." "Bury them all," Sulen ordered, then turned around and left. After all the beastmen were dead, the archers had already stopped shooting. The army of the northern fortress city began to clean up the battlefield. The corpses of the beastmen needed to be buried on the spot, and the weapons needed to be retrieved. The fire in the camp only went out when the sun rose in the east. After waiting for another 2 hours, the temperature had completely dropped. Only then did the army of the northern fortress city enter the camp to clean up the battlefield. After the fire, most of the beastmen's corpses were turned into charcoal. Tents, leather armor, food, and other supplies were also burned. The only thing left was some iron equipment. However, most of the iron equipment was burnt black, and some were even completely deformed. The iron armor was also burnt black. The soldiers of the northern fortress city didn't care about these weapons and equipment, so they could only bring them back to the forge to be reforged. Now that the northern fortress city had grey dwarven blacksmiths, the quality of their equipment had significantly increased. Many of the weapons and equipment had already reached +1 rank even if they weren't enchanted. After arranging for people to clean up the battlefield, Sulen began to look at his loot. Killing the Beastman chieftain gave him a platinum treasure chest and a legendary skill point. Defeating the Beastmen army gave him 2 gold treasure chests, and leveling up gave him a gold treasure chest. Currently, there were 4 platinum treasure chests and 3 gold treasure chests in his inventory. Apart from that, there were also 2 pieces of dark iron. Sulen calmed himself down and washed the bloodstains off his body. Only then did he open his inventory and open the treasure chests. 4 lights flashed one after another, and the sound of a system notification rang in Sulen's ears. "Congratulations, host. You have opened a platinum treasure chest. You have received a legendary soul crystal. Congratulations, host. You have opened a gold treasure chest. You have received the item Stardust. Congratulations, host. You have opened a gold treasure chest. You have received the item Commander's Tally, Crossbowman. Congratulations, host. You have opened a gold treasure chest. You have received the item Wonder Blueprint, Sky Garden, Arcane Garden." Hearing the system notification, Sulen began to look at the items this time. The most valuable item was naturally the legendary soul crystal. This was a purple crystal that was slightly bigger than an egg. The crystal was very transparent, and it was filled with powerful soul energy. This item could be used as a currency in the multiverse. Many powerful creatures in the multiverse needed this item. It was also very precious to Sulen. Many powerful legendary magic items required it to be made. However, Sulen did not plan to make any legendary items now. He planned to use this soul crystal on the Sorcerer Tower. Hathaway's Sorcerer Tower was still under construction. Although there was still a long time before it was completed, it was time to put the tower spirit on the agenda. Whether a Sorcerer Tower was strong or not depended on the tower spirit. In a legendary Sorcerer Tower, a legendary tower spirit was the standard. A sorcerer tower may have several tower spirits. These tower spirits were the managers of the sorcerer tower. They helped the sorcerer manage the sorcerer tower and assisted the sorcerer in various experiments. At the same time, they could command the golem army or the sorcerer tower's weapon system to fight back against the enemy when the sorcerer was not around. The tower spirit was directly related to the strength of the sorcerer tower. Making a tower spirit required at least a high-grade soul crystal. However, this kind of tower spirit was only a low-grade tower spirit. Its ability was limited. Even during the Arcane Empire, this kind of tower spirit was not recognized by the arcanists at all. Only the legendary tower spirit made of a legendary soul crystal was a true tower spirit. The tower spirit made of a high-grade soul crystal was more used to make the golem auxiliary system. During the Arcane Empire, the golems could be loaded with abilities such as precision strike, defensive defense, and so on. The sorcerers did not understand this technology, so the golems now did not have the special abilities of the ancient golems. Su Lin naturally did not intend to use a low-grade tower spirit. Otherwise, it would be a waste to build such a legendary sorcerer tower. Now that he had a legendary soul crystal, he was naturally ready to use it. It was said that during the Arcane Empire, the tower spirit of the floating space city required a demigod tower spirit to operate. After putting away the soul crystal, Su Lin picked up the rest of the things. Stardust sand was a kind of material from the astral world, which was very valuable. After all, this thing could only be collected in the astral world, or found a space crack to take the risk of collecting it. Stardust sand was an essential item in the production of many magic props. Now that Su Lin did not have the strength to go to the astral world, this thing was naturally very precious. In addition to the stardust sand, this time Su Lin once again got a commander's seal. This commander's seal was a crossbowman. The crossbowman could be said to be a very powerful and fragile troop. The reason for its strength was that once a large number of crossbowmen formed a crossbow formation, they were completely a killing machine on the battlefield. Even the heavy cavalry would suffer heavy losses. The fragile side was that a single crossbowman or crossbowman was very easy to be restrained. Once close, the crossbowman's lethality was even worse than the archers. However, these shortcomings still did not change the fact that crossbowmen were a powerful troop. After using the commander's seal, Su Lin got a complete crossbowman training method and also the method to make crossbows. Of course, now he only had the most basic method to make crossbows. In fact, crossbows could be upgraded on this basis. The range and power of crossbows could be improved, or it could be upgraded and transformed into a repeating crossbow. However, unlike other troop classes, the upgrade of crossbowmen was more about the upgrade of the crossbow. To upgrade the crossbow, he also needed to establish a weapons bureau dedicated to the study of crossbows. At the same time, this weapons bureau could not only study crossbows, but also large ballistas. After understanding the recruitment conditions of crossbowmen, Su Lin decided to start training crossbowmen when he returned to Northern Town and set up a weapons bureau. Compared to archers and spearmen, crossbowmen were easier to train and form a fighting force. As long as there was a crossbow, even a militia trained for a week could form a strong fighting force. Of course, crossbowmen had many shortcomings. The most obvious one was that they were expensive. It cost 100 kinar to train a crossbowman, most of which was the cost of the crossbow. Another problem was that crossbows were slow to fire. Su Lin was also surprised by the blueprint he got from the last chest. This blueprint recorded all kinds of information about building the Sky Garden of Wonders. The Sky Garden was also known as the Arcane Garden. This kind of building required mana and was very difficult to build. Su Lin looked at the materials needed to build it and was shocked. This thing required a lot of magic crystals, magic gems, high-quality marble, and obsidian as raw materials. However, after it was built, it would gain a lot of attribute bonuses. The most obvious one was that it increased the chances of newborns in the territory having the potential to become a wizard. Just this attribute alone made its value double. Chapter 274. It was not easy to become a wizard. Only one out of hundreds or thousands of humans had the potential to become a wizard. Based on this probability, there were only a few people in North Town City who had the potential to become a wizard. Once the wizard tower was built, the northern town would need many wizards. Wizards recruited from the outside would not be as useful as those he trained himself. The cost of building the Sky Garden was very high. Moreover, he was still missing some key materials. He could only slowly collect them in the future. After putting away the items in the treasure chest, Su Len casually added the 2 free attribute points he obtained from leveling up to vitality. After his attribute points reached 50, he needed 3 attribute points to increase 1 attribute. He still needed 1 attribute point to increase his strength. Therefore, Su Len planned to increase his other attributes first. After adding the attribute points, Su Len's vitality reached 38 points. Apart from the attribute points, he was left with 5 skill points. After looking at the skills, Su Len spent 4 attribute points to upgrade morale, beginner, to advanced. The effect was simple and brutal. It directly increased the morale of an army by 30 points and temporarily increased their strength by 10% for 6 hours. With the remaining skill points, Su Len spent 100,000 kinnar to purchase the half-moon/skill from the shop. He then learned the skill. Half-moon/, release your energy according to a special technique. Release a crescent-shaped energy / dealing great damage to the enemy. Maximum range is 500 meters. Level requirement, 25. Half-moon / could be upgraded to 3 sun-moon / and 5 moon /. The effect of this skill was to summon 3 or 5 half-moon / respectively. If this skill was learned to a certain level, it would be extremely useful on the battlefield. Su Len had just met the requirements to learn the half-moon /. After using up all of his skill points, Su Len only had 1 legendary skill point left. However, he did not have any suitable skills or talents to use. If he wanted to level up forbidding magic, he would need 2 legendary skill points. It was not worth it to level up his other talents. Legendary skill points could only be used once the talent reached a certain level. Some talents were in a state where they could not be leveled up. He could only wait until the next time he killed a legendary powerhouse to upgrade his forbidden magic skill. It was not easy to kill a legendary professional. Su Len had successfully killed him several times on the battlefield. If it was a lone legendary master, even if he could not defeat him, there was still a high chance that he could escape. Legendary spellcasters, for example, could teleport away if the situation was not good, unless they used dimensional anchor or spatial imprisonment in advance. However, most of the time, those legendary masters would not give you the chance to use these at all. After putting away the items, Su Len left the camp alone. There were a lot of weathered rocks in the stony wasteland, but there were very few trees. Su Len found an open area and began to try using the crescent moon /. The energy in his body revolved according to the technique of the half-moon /. Soon, a crescent-shaped energy / flashing with lightning appeared in front of him. In the next second, this energy blade flashing with lightning flew forward at an extremely fast speed. Wherever the energy blade passed, everything in front of the crescent-shaped energy blade was cut in half. The energy blade flew for a distance of 500 meters before slowly dissipating. Su Len came to the side of a rock that had been cut in half. The cut in the rock was smooth and neat, like a mirror. Even a weapon with sharpness enchantment could not achieve this kind of power. Next, Su Len tested the half-moon /. After testing, Su Len had a sufficient understanding of this skill. When releasing the half-moon / in his best state, Su Len could release it 50 times. The attack power of the half-moon / was stronger than his normal attacks. However, although the half-moon / was fast, it could still be dodged. Su Len tried to control the movement of the half-moon slash, but after expending a lot of effort, he could only slightly change the direction. If he wanted to make the half-moon slash move according to his wishes, he would need to upgrade it again. After testing the new skill, Su Len returned to the camp. At this time, the battlefield had been cleaned up. There were not many spoils of war from this battle, but no matter how small a mosquito's leg was, it was still meat, and it could not be wasted. Although the North Town's income was high, the expenses were also high. Not to mention other things, just the repair of the mystery mirror would cost at least millions of kinnar. After the construction of the Wizard Tower, the restoration of the Mystery Realm, and the third phase of the North Town City project, the treasures that Su Luen had obtained from the Grey Dwarf were already running out of money. There was also the Sky Garden that was going to be built next. After all these calculations, Su Luen became a pauper again. In addition to these, there were also military expenses, equipment expenses, and so on. In the past, it was not so bad because the barbarians did not need to spend money. Now that there were more soldiers, it was impossible not to pay them. This was a huge expense. As expected, developing a territory was a series of business that lost money. Su Len complained with a face full of sorrow. Not long after Su Len returned to the camp, a drow rushed in and reported, "My lord, we caught some spies." Spies? Spies from there? Su Len raised his eyebrows and asked. Spies from the Kingdom of Florence. They found the fire here last night and sent someone to check it out today, the drow explained. Su Len thought for a moment and said, "Bring them here." Yes. Soon, a few human soldiers with swollen faces wearing the red and blue military uniforms of Florence came to the camp. "Which army are you spies from?" Su Len glanced at these people and asked. "We belong to the Silver Lion Legion under Marquis Lancelot." When these guys were caught, they were taught a lesson by the drows. With the training skills of the drows, they were very obedient now. Marquis Lancelot. Su Len nodded. He had heard of Marquis Lancelot. This Marquis was not a feudal noble. He belonged to the palace noble and could be said to be one of the most trusted people of King Henry. After a series of inquiries, Surin also figured out the current situation of the human army. After Marquis Winter's death, Lancelot took control of the army as the vice-marshal of the army and continued to fight the orcs. However, after the bloody battle outside of Cult City, the army suffered heavy casualties. Now, they were in a state where they were afraid of the orcs and the orcs. Therefore, the human army did not press on, and the northern nobles wanted to drive the orcs out as soon as possible. However, not long ago, they were taught a lesson by the orcs and suffered heavy losses, so they could only rely on Marquis Lancelot. Su Len thought for a moment and let these spies go. Then, he asked them to pass on a message to the nobles of the Kingdom of Florence. After all, he had helped them so much. These people should at least express their gratitude. After sending a soldier to follow these people to the human camp, Su Len was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he let the army continue to rest. After receiving Sullen's invitation, Lancelot still had some doubts, especially when he heard that Su Len had killed the orc chief. Fortunately, Su Len asked someone to bring the giant axe used by the orc chief. Only then did these nobles believe that Rogthus was dead. After all, for a legendary figure, a weapon was something that they valued as much as their life. After hearing Sullen's invitation, these nobles hesitated for a while before agreeing. However, they requested to bring an army. Su Len had expected this, so he agreed immediately. At noon the next day, these nobles were escorted by more than 300 knights and servants to the agreed place. Su Len had already set up a simple tent there and left a few soldiers to serve as attendants. "Nice to meet you, Lord Su Len," Lancelot greeted Su Len. Lancelot was a conferred knight. He was powerful and handsome, and it was said that he was very popular among the noblewomen in the imperial capital. After meeting him, Lancelot was a handsome man in his 30s. However, he was still a level lower than Sulen. "Nice to meet you, Marquis Lancelot." Sulen waved at him. "Lord Sulen, I've heard a lot of your name during this period of time." Lancelot got down from his horse and walked over quickly, giving Sulen a warm hug. Is that so?" Sulen's expression was a little stiff, but he was doubtful. Could this guy be gay? To think that he's so warm on our first meeting. Should I keep my distance from him? Of course. Some of the nobles who escaped to Cult City told us about how you attacked the Beastmen's logistics. I heard that you defeated an army of 20,000 beastmen with very few casualties. Back then, many people didn't believe it. Now that you've killed the Beastmen's chief, Rogthus, I think no one will doubt it anymore. Lancelot's handsome face had an exaggerated expression as he kept on praising Sulen, not stingy with his compliments. Even Sulen blushed a little when he heard this. However, he did not feel embarrassed at all. If it were someone else, the first impression he gave off would be that he was a bootlicker. However, when it came from Marquis Lancelot, there was no such feeling at all. As expected, those who could make a name for themselves in the imperial capital were not simple people. Sulen understood Marquis Lancelot's background. To be honest, this Marquis did not come from a good background. As an illegitimate son, he could not inherit the family name. However, he now had a title that far surpassed his father's. Although this title did not have any land and only a few manors, it was still very shocking. This is all luck. Moreover, Marquis Winter also contributed to killing Rogthus. If it wasn't for Marquis Winter, I wouldn't have had the chance to kill this Beastman's chief, Sulen said politely. This isn't luck. Even if it's an injured legend, it's still a legend. Lancelot smiled at Sulen. As a conferred knight, he knew how powerful a legend was. Oh, right. I reckon that you'll become the subject of songs by wandering poets soon. Lancelot winked and smiled. Chapter 275. Think about it. Nobles who establish their own territories, then defeat the orcs and kill the orc chieftain. Many knight novels are based on this, but they are all fake. Yours is the real deal. I think it won't be long before many knights come to you. Sulen was not interested in this. As for the knights who came to him, most of them were either powerful or the second son of a small noble family. Basically, they all wanted a piece of land. He had no intention of accepting these knights. After all, the knights in Northern City were not ranked. Give them a piece of land? Sulen would be an idiot if he did that. Alright, let's not talk about this. Come in and eat, Sulen said with a wave of his hand. I'm also very interested in the food in Northern City. Sulen led Lancelot and the other nobles into the tent. The food was already prepared. Although they were in a military camp, the food prepared by Sulen was quite good. The cooking skills of the military camp's chefs were also trained by the halfling Frodo. Although they were not as good as the halfling, they were much better than most human chefs. Sulen also prepared a barbecue. He hunted a gazelle in the wilderness and marinated its tender parts with spices. When it was time to eat, he directly barbecued it. Soon, the aroma of the meat filled the tent. Finally, when the barbecue was served by the chefs, some green vegetables were placed on a silver plate as accompaniment. On the silver plate, the red meat was wrapped in a layer of sauce. The edges were slightly burnt, but the meat inside was fresh and tender. There was also a layer of cumin sprinkled on top. With a gentle bite, the sauce from the barbecue filled one's mouth. It was slightly hot, but it tasted great. It's delicious. The chefs here are as good as His Majesty's. Also, what spices did you sprinkle on it? Lancelot's eyes lit up as soon as he took a bite. He immediately discovered the key. Cumin was a spice that was naturally very compatible with barbecue. This is cumin, a spice that can only be found in the northern wasteland. It's very rare, Su Len said with a smile. It's delicious. This spice is amazing. The other nobles exclaimed in admiration. Several nobles grimaced in pain from the heat, but their swallowing speed did not slow down at all. I'm going to sell this spice to the public. If you like it, you can buy it in the northern town. I'll give you a 20% discount, Su Len said with a smile. I'll ask the servants to buy some from the northern town, Lancelot said. After lunch, everyone finally got down to business. To put it bluntly, it was about the distribution of merits. Su Len did not intend to take these merits. He did not intend to become a part of the Kingdom of Florence, so these merits were prepared to be used in exchange for benefits. After a series of exchanges, Su Len gained a lot of benefits from these nobles, and the nobles also divided up Sulen's contributions. Both sides were very satisfied. After the discussion, the nobles from the northern provinces left one after another. However, Lancelot didn't intend to get up. Seeing this, Su Len waved his hand and signaled his servants to leave. Marquis Lancelot, is there anything else? Su Len tilted his body to make himself more comfortable in the chair. Lancelot finished the rum in his hand and put down the glass. Sir Su Len, you don't want to join the Kingdom of Florence, right? Why do you say that? Su Len raised his eyebrows. You gave all the merits to those nobles. It's obvious that you don't care about the reward from His Majesty, Lancelot said with a shrug. So what? Su Len said lazily. With the strength of the northern town, the Kingdom of Florence will agree to it, Lancelot said without any hesitation. But I have a better way. What way? Su Len asked. He didn't want to make the relationship with the Kingdom of Florence too tense. You should know that we suffered a great loss in this orc invasion. Even Marquis Winter died in battle. This is a huge blow to the Kingdom of Florence. The death of a legendary powerhouse is indeed a serious matter, but the surrounding countries aren't having it easy either. Su Len nodded. The surrounding countries were also troubled by the orcs' invasion. This time, the orcs didn't just invade Florence. The surrounding countries were involved, and the situation was even worse. It's not a foreign matter, but a domestic matter. Lancelot shook his head. Let me explain it to you. Seeing that Su Len was a little confused, Lancelot picked up the glass and poured some wine. He shook it and said, You should also know that there have always been a few factions in the Kingdom of Florence. I don't know much about this. Su Len shrugged. After all, he wasn't in a high position in the Kingdom of Florence, so he didn't have access to the news of the highest level. In addition, he was busy expanding his territory after coming to the northern wilderness. His information channel couldn't be compared to the old nobles at all. Most of the time, he learned from the news brought by the caravans. The news brought by the caravans was at least 2 to 3 months ago, or even half a year ago. Okay, I'll just say it. Lancelot smiled awkwardly. You should know that the Florentine royal family wasn't the Henry family in the beginning, right? Su Len nodded. The earliest royal family of the Kingdom of Florence was the Roman royal family, then it became the Nord royal family, and finally the current Henry family. It could be said that it had changed 3 times. These families were basically inextricably linked by blood, which was one of the reasons why Florence had so many heirs. There were originally 2 legendary powerhouses who were loyal to the royal family. One was Marquis Winter, and the other was Marquis Brook. The Kingdom of Florence had 5 legendary powerhouses, and the other 3 were loyal to the other 3 Marquis families. Originally, this was nothing. The royal family with 2 legendary powerhouses had an advantage against any Marquis family. Besides, the 3 Marquis families were also very filthy. This allowed the royal family to hold the power of the kingdom, but now the death of Marquis Winter has broken this balance. The royal family and the other 3 Marquis families are back to the same starting line. What do you think the consequences will be? Lancelot said helplessly. Although he was also a marquis, he didn't have a corresponding territory. Besides, as a trusted aide of King Hunter, once the Hunter family was replaced by another marquis, he could only retire to the countryside. The throne is rotated. It's my turn this year? Su Len understood. You can say that. Of course, the royal family of the Kingdom of Florence wouldn't be wiped out. Otherwise, the Roman royal family and the Nord royal family would have been long gone, and there wouldn't be three marquis families now. The nobles of Florence were used to this kind of thing. Then why are you looking for me? You want me to be loyal to the royal family? Su Len frowned. I also want to, but will you agree? Of course not. That's why we came up with another plan, Lancelot said. What's the plan? Su Luen was interested. The Henry royal family will form a political alliance with Northern City. Northern City will support the Henry family as the royal family, and the Henry family will recognize your position. At the same time, they won't restrict caravans from trading in Northern City, Lancelot said seriously. Political alliance? If the other marquis families make a move, will I have to start a war with them? Su Len asked. How is that possible? Lancelot rolled his eyes. The royal family of the Kingdom of Florence won't start a war. It's more of a political reason. After all, the royal family still has a legendary figure. If they really start a war, Florence will be finished. The surrounding countries won't miss such a good opportunity. You just need to declare your support for the Henry royal family. There won't be a war. I see. Then I can consider it. Su Len didn't say anything definite. Okay, but please give us an answer as soon as possible, Lancelot said. By the way, Mr. Su Len, you're not married yet, right? Lancelot suddenly thought of something and asked. Su Len shook his head. No. That's great, Lancelot said excitedly. Princess Sophia of the royal family just came of age this year. She's very beautiful and has a noble status. If you agree, I can talk to King Henry and let Princess Sophia marry you. Su Len couldn't help but roll his eyes. He was directly trying to pimp out Lancelot. No. Su Len was still very wary of political means like a marriage alliance. Don't be in a hurry to reject. Why don't you two meet first? Lancelot continued. Su Len didn't agree. In the end, the marriage alliance was put on hold. However, judging from Lancelot's expression, he didn't seem to have given up. After the two finished their discussion, they left separately. They had only reached an agreement about the political alliance. Since Henry's royal family wanted to borrow Sullen's power, Su Len naturally wouldn't let it go. He wouldn't agree without enough benefits. After Lancelot and Sullen's discussion, Lancelot returned to the barracks and immediately took out a fist-sized crystal ball. This crystal ball was an expensive sound transmission tool. Using this crystal ball, one could directly contact the capital. Now, he was discussing with the royal family about Su Len. After all, although Lancelot was the king's favorite, many of his conditions had to be agreed by the king. A crystal ball was worth about 10,000 kinnar, and it could only be used for a limited number of times. Only these big nobles had the money to use it. After staying here for 2 days, Su Len and Lancelot finally discussed various things. Su Len also agreed to form a political alliance with Henry's royal family. Of course, they had to pay a lot. For example, they had to pay taxes. The caravans of North Town City would be treated the same as them when trading in Florence. For example, the Kingdom of Florence couldn't stop North Town City from recruiting refugees in the kingdom. After the two sides finished their discussion, they still needed to sign a formal agreement. The agreement needed the king to sign and stamp it. It would take some time. Su Len didn't continue to wait here. He led his army back to North Town City. P.S. The last chapter updated the main character's latest attributes. Chapter 276. After wiping out the orc rearguard, Surin led the army back to the northern city. By this time, the remaining orcs had basically all evacuated to the northern wilderness. The kingdom's allied army had pursued the orcs for a while and had achieved some results, but the orcs' main force had retreated. Su Luan originally wanted to see if there was a chance to keep the high priest of the orcs, but now it seemed impossible. When he left, Su Luan also took the refugees he had gathered in the wild with him. But this time, the number of refugees he gathered was much smaller, only more than 3,000 people in total. It took Su Len 4 days to return to the northern town. At this time, the northern town had become a large construction site. Because of the skyrocketing population, the northern town was now overcrowded. In just 2 months, Su Luan had immigrated more than 100,000 people from all the provinces in the northern region. The third phase of the northern town was currently under construction. According to Sulan's blueprint, the third phase of the northern town's walls would be 8 kilometers long. If it was completed, the northern town could easily accommodate more than 100,000 people. It would be one of the largest cities in the entire kingdom of Florence. It wasn't that Su Len couldn't build a bigger city. In fact, with the current productivity of society, a city with more than 100,000 people would need other towns to provide for it. After all, the more people living in the city, the more resources they would need. In this era without fertilizers, the output of the land was limited. It would take a lot of land to provide for a city with 100,000 people. If they kept expanding the land, many farmers would have to live outside the city. If it were the kingdom of Florence, this wouldn't be a problem. After all, the land in Florence had been developed for hundreds of years. The number of kobolds and goblins in the wilderness was limited. However, the northern town was different. It had only been occupied for a year. Even if the northern town's army kept patrolling, the number of monsters in the wilderness would still increase. It wasn't safe for the farmers to live far away from the city. Therefore, Su Len wasn't planning to build a big city with too many people. Since the northern town had fertilizer and the harvest altar, the land here had a lot of production. It wouldn't be difficult to provide for a city with 100,000 people. However, Su Len did not plan to build such a large city. He planned to build another city to the west of North Town City. So far, Sulan's territory had 3 cities. Aside from North Town City, there was also Mirror Lake City and Centaur City. However, Mirror Lake City and Centaur City did not have a large population. After several migrations, Mirror Lake City's population had reached 10,000, while Centaur City's population was even lower, only around 4,000. Su Luan planned to leave 60,000 people in the North Town, 20,000 in the Mirror Lake City, 5,000 in the Centaur City, and the remaining 15,000 in the new city to be built. More than 20 gathering points of various sizes had been set up outside the northern citadel. Each gathering point had 2,000 to 5,000 people, which added up to more than 50,000 people. These people were currently working on the construction site. The construction of the northern citadel's third phase of construction was prioritized, and it had to be completed before November. This was because it would start snowing in North Town City in November. If there were no houses by then, these refugees and slaves would freeze to death. It was already August, and there were only 3 months until November. It was very stressful to complete the construction of the city walls and houses in such a short period of time. Sulan's return did not affect the construction of the city. Now, there were many grassroots officials in North Town City. These trained officials could do their jobs. As long as they were given a task, they would do it according to the requirements. Therefore, even though the number of people in North Town City had increased by several times, Su Len had fewer things to deal with. In the past, Su Len had to deal with a lot of trivial matters. Now, the people under him had taken care of everything in an orderly manner. As for corruption, abuse of power, these problems had not appeared in North Town City yet. It did not mean that the officials in North Town City had high ideological awareness. In fact, these people also had their own selfish desires. To prevent this from happening, North Town City had set up a special monitoring department. Apart from the monitoring department, the most important thing was the prison in North Town City. Su Len had spent a lot of effort to build the prison, and the results were surprisingly good. After the grassroots officials received their training, they had to come to the prison for their last ideological and political lesson. After experiencing the special treatment here, all the grassroots officials became respectful and fearful of this place. They also worked diligently and did not dare to cross the line. In order to deepen the memory of these grassroots officials, Su Len had set a rule that every 6 months, all the officials had to go to the prison for ideological and political re-education. As for the results, it seemed to be quite good so far. As for the jailers and wardens in the prison, because they worked here, the effects here were ineffective unless they were no longer working in the prison. Of course, there was also a monitoring system for the prison staff. Su Len had hired a sculptor to carve 2 statues of mythical creatures according to the myths and legends in his previous life. These 2 statues had no other functions. Tao Wu, lifelike +33, intimidating +34, indestructible +30, distinguishing between loyal and traitorous +34, questioning heart +32. With these, the governance of North Town City had reached a level that was unattainable even in his previous life. Of course, Su Len still had a lot of benefits for the officials. In addition to the basic salary, there were extra benefits every month. It could be said that the living standards of the grassroots officials were quite good. Su Len did not calculate the salaries of the officials accurately like Zhu Hongwu did. The salaries were so low that the officials could barely feed their families. Although Su Len did not advocate high salaries for honest people, it was unacceptable to let the horses run and not eat grass. How could there be such a good thing in the world? After all, there were only a few people like Hai Rui in the entire Ming dynasty. The benefits of the grassroots officials in North Town City were quite good. Although they could not be rich, they could still live without worrying about food and clothing. Moreover, Su Len promised them that when schools were built in North Town City, their children would be able to enroll directly. Although Su Len had less work, the number of grassroots officials was starting to decrease. Su Len did not have a good solution at the moment. He could only choose some refugees from the slaves. When these people were transported to North Town City, all of them were divided into small teams. Some of the grassroots officials were selected from these people. Those who did a good job and cooperated well during the migration were all promoted to grassroots officials. They were then allowed to learn from the previous grassroots officials for a period of time. Once they learned enough, those who passed the internship were sent to the grassroots officials' training base in batches. Those who did not pass the assessment were sent back directly. Su Len used this method to train a group of grassroots officials quickly. The arrival of a large number of people not only made North Town City crowded, but also brought a lot of problems such as security and hygiene. The main problem was that there were only 300 people in the city guard. Relying on 300 people to manage a city of 100,000 people was a serious lack of manpower. When the army from North Town City returned, Su Len temporarily transferred 1,000 spearmen to serve as the security force. At the same time, the military camp began to recruit new soldiers. Some of these new soldiers were to serve as the security force, while the others were to serve as spearmen and archers. Su Len wanted to build the formation breaker and archer battalion, so he needed a large number of spear guards and sharpshooters. Due to the probability of advancement, these 2 special forces would not be full for a long time. The third phase of North Town City's city wall was 15 meters tall and 8 kilometers long. The top was 5 meters wide, and the bottom was 6.5 meters wide. It could be said that this part of the city wall was the largest construction apart from the Wonder Building. To build this wall, North Town City used 60,000 people to work. Among them, 30,000 were human slaves, and the rest were kobolds, gnomes, and gnolls. The 60,000 people were assigned to the construction site that was 8 kilometers long. The brick kiln factory in North Town City also began to produce bricks in large quantities. Because the residential buildings were also being built, the demand for bricks in North Town City skyrocketed. There was already a lack of supply. Sulan allowed the brick kiln factory to expand production while transporting rocks from the quarry. Even so, the supply of bricks was still tight. Faced with this situation, Sulan had to use the previous method of building houses, which was to use mud and straw to build houses. Although this kind of house was not beautiful, and the lighting was bad, and it was easy to get wet on rainy days, it was good at keeping warm. These houses only needed to survive the winter. When the supply of bricks was enough, the houses could be rebuilt. The large number of people coming in made North Town City's daily necessities very tight. There was no shortage of food in North Town City, and there were enough potatoes. However, the supply of meat was tight. The human body needed to eat a lot of meat, so Sulan used a large number of fish as a substitute. Everyone was given a bowl of fish soup every day. As for beef and mutton, it was better not to think about it. North Town City was severely lacking in beef and mutton. Sulan had ordered to stop the slaughter of beef and mutton. The livestock raised by the centaurs had not been sold yet, so Sulan was buying beef and mutton from the caravans. The soldiers in North Town City were strong, loyal, and disciplined. However, they also had a weakness, which was that they consumed a lot of meat. After all, a knight had to eat at least half a kilogram of meat a day. Their strong bodies required a lot of meat to provide energy. The army in the North Town could be said to be all gluttons. The amount of meat they consumed every day made Suluan's liver ache. A meal would consume at least dozens of cows and hundreds of sheep. Now, there were only some cattle and sheep left in the farms in the North Town. Just for meat, Sulan spent nearly 10,000 kinar every month. Chapter 277. With the development of the northern town, Suluan was preparing to establish a principality. A duchy was the smallest country in the world, and the king was usually called a Grand Duke. Above the duchy were the kingdoms, empires, and of course, there was also the city-state alliance, such as the city-state alliance in the south of the Kingdom of Florence. It was a loose alliance formed by more than 20 prosperous free cities or noble territories. There was no subordinate relationship between the city-states, and each was in a state of autonomy. However, if you underestimated this alliance, you would suffer a great loss. Although this city-state alliance only had 1/5 of the land of the Kingdom of Florence, its population was 1/3 of the Kingdom of Florence. No matter how you looked at it, the Kingdom of Florence could suppress this city-state alliance. However, the reality was that the Kingdom of Florence was beaten by them. In the few conflicts between the Kingdom of Florence and the Romavia city-state alliance in history, it was always the Kingdom of Florence that was defeated. Not only the Kingdom of Florence, but even the surrounding countries were no match for the Romavia city-state alliance. It could be said that the Rolandvia city-state alliance was a little overlord in the surrounding areas. If it were not for the fact that they were not keen on invading, the surrounding kingdoms and duchies would have been unified by them. The reason why this city-state alliance was so powerful was that the wizard civilization here was prosperous. It had the largest wizard academy on the continent. Even the Rolandvia city-state alliance was said to be formed by the Starry Sky Council. The number of wizards they had was more than the number of wizards in the surrounding countries combined. At the same time, the Rolandvia city-state alliance was also one of the most developed areas in commercial activities. Sulan wanted to establish a duchy, but it was still a little lacking. After all, although it now had a population of 120,000, it only had one city. In this case, it was still possible to establish a free city-state, but establishing a duchy was a little small. Fortunately, with the continuous construction of the northern citadel, other cities were also rapidly building. It would not take long for the northern citadel to have 4 cities. By then, it would be easy for other forces to recognize the establishment of a duchy. For the construction of the city, the northern citadel once again began to go to the wilderness to capture slaves. Now that the northern citadel had enough military force, it was better to let them go through actual combat than training. After Su Lan had finished dealing with some important matters, he began to build a training camp for the shooting camp. This training camp was also placed in the outer city, right next to the formation breaker. Su Lan specially mobilized a construction team and used 3 days to build this camp. After the construction of the camp was completed, Su Luan began to gather all the archers who had been upgraded to the level of marksman. There were a total of 4 archers who had reached the level of sharpshooter, 1 more than the last time he checked. 2 of the 4 archers were war spirits. After all, the earliest archers under his command were war spirits. If they wanted to be promoted to a soldier of the sound shooting battalion, they had to go through a cruel training. After completing the training, they had to merge with the light ball of the soldiers of the sound shooting battalion. Only then could they be considered to have successfully advanced. Because of his experience in the capture barracks, Su Lan also had some experience in training the archery camp. After the camp was established, he let these master archers enter for training. Su Lan had not been paying attention to them because in addition to the sound shooting battalion, the continuous battle with the orcs had allowed some long spears to advance to the spear guard. Naturally, Su Lan did not waste time. He directly gathered these newly advanced spear guard. This time, there were 11 spear guards who participated in the advancement. Among them, 5 were war spirits, and the rest were ordinary humans. After such a long time, the first batch of war spirits that Su Lan had summoned, except for these, had all died in battle. The war spirits that were recruited after that were still of low levels. 11 spear guards participated in the trial of the formation breaker. Su Lan could not help but feel nervous now. This time, he did not know how many of the 2 elite soldiers would be able to successfully advance. The trial of the formation breaker and the sound shooting battalion lasted for a week. Su Lan arranged for people to continuously supply these 2 camps. Then, in addition to coming here every day to treat the injured soldiers, he would check the progress of the Secret Realms repair and the Wizard Tower's construction. The progress of the restoration of these 2 places was very slow, especially the Wizard Tower. In this era, building a 120-meter tall tower was an impossible task if one did not have supernatural powers. Because of the war, the trade routes were not smooth. The price of obsidian had risen, and the supply had decreased a lot. In order to obtain enough obsidian, Su Lan began to send the Grey Dwarfs to find obsidian veins in the underground world. According to the wizard's research, the formation of obsidian was related to the activity of magma. There were no volcanoes in the northern wilderness, so there were very few obsidian reserves. The underground world was rich in mineral resources, but the amount of obsidian was also limited. The Grey Dwarfs found some scattered obsidian veins. The production of obsidian was very low, and some of the obsidian's quality was poor. Su Lan also needed to use spells to remove the impurities. There were not many obsidian, but some iron ore, crystal, and copper ores were found. Su Lan drew a mineral map of these discovered veins in the underground world. When there were enough people, they would slowly excavate them. Lord. Just as Su Lan finished his daily training and returned from the formation breaker and sniper camp, a servant hurried to him. What's the hurry? Su Lan glanced at him and asked. The Grey Dwarves in Orlando City have just sent word that they have found an obsidian vein, the attendant said respectfully. Great, tell them to hurry up and excavate. Su Lan said happily. The Grey Dwarfs are ready to excavate, but what? The obsidian vein is in the territory of the Taurans. The Grey Dwarfs wanted to excavate the vein, but the Taurans refused. They also captured some Grey Dwarfs, the servant said quickly. Taurans? Who gave them the courage to capture my people? Sullen's eyes flashed coldly, and the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. Do you have information about the Taurens? How many of them are there? How strong are they? After a while, Sulen continued to ask. According to the Grey Dwarfs, this Tauren tribe has at least 200 people. The specific strength is not clear, but the Grey Dwarfs found that there is a Tauren shaman among them. The Taurens were not a widespread race on the continent. They were large humanoid monsters, and in fact, they were called Minotaurs. Minotaurs were strong and usually very warlike creatures. These creatures had high physique and strength. Usually, an adult Tauren's strength could reach twice that of a human. They were stronger than ogres, and more intelligent. Furthermore, they were proficient in forging. Although they could only forge their own axes, armor, and shields, they were much stronger than ogres. A qualified Tauren warrior was at the level of a Grand Knight. These 3-meter-tall, muscular monsters had very strong destructive power. As for the Berserk Taurens, their strength was at the level of a Knight Commander. Although the Minotaurs had limited intelligence, they were very talented in some aspects. For example, they wouldn't get lost in a maze, and their sense of smell allowed them to track their enemies through smell. These various aspects made the Minotaurs famous in the underground world for being difficult to deal with. The Taurens believed in the Tauren king, Buffet. Although they were both dark creatures, the Taurens and Gnolls often fought because the Tauren king, Buffet, and the Gnoll king, Jianghu, were mortal enemies. 200 Minotaurs were not something that the Duergar of Orlando could deal with. At this time, a scene of a Duergar fighting with a Minotaur suddenly appeared in Su Luan's mind. The 3-meter-tall Minotaur was tall and mighty, while the Duergar, who was only 1.5 meters tall at most, looked like a child standing next to them. The difference in height was so obvious. How could they fight? Jump up and hit their knees? At this thought, Sulen wanted to laugh. Soon, Su Luan came back to his senses. These Minotaurs were definitely going to attack them. Regardless of whether they attacked the Grey Dwarf or not, he still understood the principle of allowing others to sleep soundly beside him. This underground world had been regarded by Sulen as his territory. These Taurens were going to fight sooner or later, but now it was a little earlier. However, there was not enough information about these Taurens. Sulen was going to send the Drows to investigate. He asked Aiden to send people to collect information, and Sulen began to gather soldiers. 200 Taurens with the strength of at least a knight were not easy to deal with, especially in an area with a complicated environment like the underground world. Without full confidence, Sulen would not act rashly. They were different from all the enemies Sulen had encountered before. These Taurens knew how to forge armor and weapons, so their equipment was very good. In addition to their strength and physical strength, they were very difficult to deal with. In addition to the soldiers in the northern city, Sulen also sent people to invite Alex. This battle also required the help of the Harpies. Although these Taurens were wearing heavy armor and the effect of throwing stones was limited, the damage of throwing kerosene would not be reduced. Su Luan was worried that if the place where these Minotaurs lived was a maze, it would be a headache. In a maze, it would be difficult to use human wave tactics, and the environment of the maze was not friendly to the Harpies. After giving the orders, Sulen continued to check on the training of the formation breaker and the sniper battalion while waiting for information. A week passed quickly. After a week of training, the 11 spear guards and the 4 sharpshooters completed all the training. Looking at these energetic soldiers, Sulen was very happy. Sulen brought these soldiers to a quiet room for their advancement. He took out 15 small light orbs and chose to fuse them. The light orbs entered the bodies of these soldiers, and a progress bar appeared on the images of these soldiers. The fusion had begun. Chapter 278. In Sullen's system, 15 soldiers were in the process of advancing. It took about 2 hours to advance, but those who failed to advance often didn't take that long. After about an hour, soldiers who failed to advance began to come out one after another. Su Len didn't have any good way to deal with these people. The success rate of fusing the templates of the formation breaker and the sound shooter camp was not high. As for the better self-created hero template, although the success rate of this thing was 100%, the probability of obtaining it was too low. Su Len had only obtained 2 so far. Moreover, the self-created hero template was not something that anyone could use. Ordinary soldiers had no chance to use it. One by one, the soldiers who failed to advance left the quiet room. The light balls of the templates were also taken back into the tiger tally. Finally, after 2 hours, the last 3 soldiers came out of the quiet room. They had successfully fused the templates. 2 soldiers of the formation breaker and 1 archer of the sound shooter camp. Sound shooter camp, current population, 1500. After a cruel selection of excellent archers, they have successfully advanced to become soldiers of the sound shooter camp. They have a stronger physique, elite vision, and powerful attack power. The soldiers of the sound shooter camp inherited all the archers' previous talents, including advanced agility, intermediate strength, tenacity, eagle eye, evasion, and other talents. They also added an exclusive talent of the sound shooter camp, sound shooter. Sound shooter, sharp arrow, rain of arrows, featherwood shooter, life and death, attack speed increased by 30%, range increased by 30%, additional effect, rain of arrows, sharp arrow, rain of arrows, shoot a large number of arrows in a very short period of time. Range of arrows is reduced by 20%, power is reduced by 15%, attack speed is increased by 200% for 30 seconds. After use, the user will enter a weakened state. Sharp arrow, shoot at a target with great effort, attack distance increased by 50%, arrow speed increased by 100%, additional effect, armor break. Seeing that the archer of the sound shooter camp had successfully advanced, Su Len couldn't wait to take him to the training ground for testing. The basic ability test was quickly completed. Whether it was the range or the number of times the bow was pulled, it was much higher than the previous archer. In addition to these, there was also the test of new skills. After activating sky-filling arrow rain, the archers of the sniper battalion instantly grabbed 5 arrows and began to shoot. Their speed was extremely fast. Then, wave after wave of arrows were shot out. In 30 seconds, the archers of the sniper battalion had shot out at least 20 waves of arrows. In the end, the target 200 meters away was filled with hundreds of arrows. Furthermore, the arrow penetrated the target. This kind of attack power could already penetrate ordinary iron armor. In other words, a single archer from the sound shooting battalion could wipe out a group of 100 soldiers in just 30 seconds. Sullen's eyes lit up when he saw this. However, even though the skill sky rain of arrows was powerful, it would cause the player to enter a weakened state after using it. They would need to rest for a period of time to recover. During this period, the shooting speed, range, and power of the archers would decrease by 50%. After the archery battalion recovered, they began to test out the skill, great precision. Compared to the dazzling arrows that filled the sky, great precision was only an ordinary arrow. However, this arrow was no less stunning than the previous arrows that filled the sky. A flash of light could be seen on the arrow. Then, the arrow streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning and instantly hit the target. The center of the target was directly pierced by the arrow. After piercing the target, the arrow continued to penetrate the rock wall behind it. In the end, nearly half of the arrow was buried in the rock wall behind it. Seeing such exaggerated power, Su Len couldn't help but inwardly click his tongue. Even dwarf plate armor couldn't block this power. Moreover, the shooting range was 400 meters. The effect of this arrow was already comparable to a ballista, and its accuracy far exceeded that of a ballista. Although a ballista could also shoot 500 to 600 meters, after 100 to 200 meters, the accuracy was very low. This skill was very useful for sniping enemy generals on the battlefield. Although Sky Rain of Arrows didn't cause one to enter a weakened state after using Sky Rain of Arrows, it still couldn't be used continuously. Moreover, using this skill consumed a lot of energy. Even if one was at full strength, they could only use it 3 times. The archers of the Sound Shooting Battalion were unexpectedly powerful. If 500 archers of the Sound Shooting Battalion were to release their skills together on the battlefield, it was possible to directly wipe out an army. However, when he thought about the success rate of the advancement, Su Len couldn't help but scratch his head. Of course, after seeing the power of the archers of the Archery Battalion, Su Luen also had some expectations for the ultimate class of half-elf archers. However, the half-elf archers required too much EXP to advance, and there was still a long way to go before they could advance into phantom magic archers. The development of the northern battlefront city was very fast. More than 80% of the city's population was building their territory. Apart from housing and city walls, the land reclamation in the northern battlefront city continued to increase. According to Sullen's plan, the northern battlefront city needed to reclaim 100,000 acres of fertile land. 100,000 acres of fertile land sounded like a lot, but on average, it was less than 1 acre per person. Take Cult City for example. There were more than 300,000 acres of fertile land around the city. Many farmers had already moved out of the city to make it easier for them to farm. The same would happen to the territories around the northern battlefront city after it stabilized. After the outer city of the northern battlefront city was built, Su Len planned to move the market there too. The inner city was mostly built with housing. Perhaps the northern battlefront city would also rise one day with real estate. Since the population of the city had increased, Su Len asked the army to recruit more soldiers. However, these soldiers would not join the army directly. They would be part of the militia instead. They would not be paid, only some subsidies. Su Len planned to train most of the men in the northern battlefront city into the militia. Of course, the militia training was not as good as the regular army, but it had a lot of benefits. For example, it cost less. If there was a shortage of soldiers during a battle, the militia could help defend the city. Although the militia's combat power was low, they were still good at defending the city. The militia could also be used as a supplement to the regular army. If the regular army suffered casualties, the militia could pick the best ones to replace them. Seeing that the northern battlefront city was developing well, Su Len brought some people to the Mirror Lake City. Compared to the northern battlefront city, the conditions in the Mirror Lake City were much simpler. The city walls had already been built. Now, they were building houses and some basic facilities. Mirror Lake City had a big lake next to it, so there was a lot of fish there. The lake was the main source of meat for the city. The population of the Mirror Lake City had been replenished a few times, and now, there were around 10,000 people. They still needed the support of the northern battlefront city for food. According to Sullen's plan, the Mirror Lake City needed to develop 3,000 mu of farmland before the snowfall this year. Mirror Lake City had already developed a few hundred mu of farmland. The Mirror Lake City only had 500 soldiers, but these 500 soldiers were all elite veterans. These soldiers were also divided into 2 groups. They took turns to sweep the surrounding plains and capture more slaves. Northern Battlefront City, Mirror Lake City, and Centaur City formed a triangle. After the 3 cities took turns clearing out the area, the number of monsters had gradually decreased. Perhaps in a few years, villages and towns could be built in this area. The triangular plains would also be quickly cultivated. Su Len did not appoint anyone to be in charge of the Mirror Lake City, so many things had to be reported to the northern battlefront city. Then, after the northern battlefront city made a decision, they would have to send the order back. Going back and forth was a bit troublesome. Su Len had another purpose this time, and that was to appoint some officials. At the sawmill to the east of the Mirror Lake City, there was a small-scale battle going on there. Everyone, speed up. Charge. Under the command, the soldiers of the northern battlefront city began to charge. The leading soldier roared and threw down his shield. He raised his spear and began to charge. The archers behind him also began to provide cover. Archers, 45 degrees to the side. Cover them with arrows. The northern battlefront city's army was made up of spearmen and archers. At the same time, there were also some centaur cavalry. However, the Mirror Lake city did not have such equipment. The spearmen wearing metal armor and holding spears began to charge. Aside from orcs and ogres, the other races in the wilderness could not stop them. On the battlefield, the soldiers were facing some gnolls. There were about 300 gnolls, and their physiques were more robust. They were about 2 meters tall and were equipped with simple weapons. The workers of the sawmill were hiding behind fences. In front of them were some spearmen defending. Many areas outside of the Mirror Lake city were being harassed by these monsters. The rain of arrows covered the area, and a large number of gnolls were turned into hedgehogs. The vanguard suffered heavy casualties, and their formation was instantly disrupted. The charging spearmen took advantage of this opportunity to speed up, and their 3-meter-long spears pierced through the gnolls. The spearmen's charge did not slow down, and they continued to charge forward. Following that, more gnolls were pierced by the spears. Basically, every spear had 2 to 3 gnolls skewered on it. At this point, the spearmen's momentum had been exhausted. It was time for the spearmen in the front row to drop their spears and draw their swords from their waists, continuing to fight the jackallans. The spearmen in the back row weaved through the gaps and began to push the gnolls back. Charge! Just as the gnolls were being forced back, an angry roar sounded out. 20 barbarian warriors charged from the flank. Compared to the spearmen's charge, the barbarians' charge was even more unstoppable. Although there were only 20 of them, they gave off a feeling that the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart. They were unstoppable. Bang! 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 After a series of muffled sounds, the gnolls standing at the outermost edge were sent flying by the barbarians. When they landed, their bodies were clearly twisted. It was obvious that many of their bones had been broken. Blood kept coming out of their mouths. It seemed that they did not have long to live. After charging into the enemy's formation, the barbarians began to wave their axes. Everywhere they passed, there was no enemy. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. A large number of gnolls were cut in half by the sharp axes. For a moment, the gnolls' formation became even more chaotic and was about to collapse. Chapter 279. Awo. At this moment, a taller jackallan wearing iron armor let out a howl. Then, the chaotic gnolls resumed their formation. Leader? The leader of the spearmen reacted instantly. This group of gnolls was under the command of a leader. No wonder they could hold on for so long under the attack of the Northgard city army. After confirming the gnolls' location, the general gave the order, 130 meters ahead. Target that big gnoll in metal armor. Cover it with arrows. After hearing the order, the archers first calculated the distance, then raised their bows and started shooting. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of bowstrings was heard continuously. In the next second, a large number of arrows flew into the air. 100 arrows directly covered the gnoll leader's location, completely blocking any space to dodge. Before it could continue to command the army, it was nailed to the ground by the rain of arrows. A large number of arrows pierced through the crude metal armor on its body, making it look like a big hedgehog. The death of the leader caused the gnolls, who had just stabilized, to fall into chaos again. Some of the gnolls had already started to run away. Under the combined attack of the spearmen, the barbarians, and the archers, those gnolls were no match at all. Soon, all the gnolls who resisted were killed. After arranging for people to capture the captives, the rest of the soldiers began to clean up the battlefield. Su Len stood not far away and watched the end of the battle. He nodded in his mind. He was patrolling the territory with the soldiers, and he didn't expect to see the spearman's captain commanding the battle when he arrived. "Go and call the spearman's captain over." Su Len ordered the servant next to him. Soon, a servant rode over. After about 10 minutes, a burly spearman's captain with a scar on his face came in front of Su Len and bowed. "Greetings, Lord." "Rise," Su Len said with a smile. "You were the one commanding the battle just now?" "Yes, Lord." The soldier nodded and said. Although he had seen it with his own eyes, Su Len was still surprised. One had to know that Su Len didn't train these soldiers to command. This soldier was completely self-taught. Thinking of this, Su Len used the system to check the soldier's information. The system prompt sounded in Sullen's ears, and what surprised him was the content of the prompt. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have discovered a hero among your subordinates. A new hero? Su Len was shocked when he heard the system notification. After all, the chances of a soldier becoming a hero were extremely low. He did not expect to be so lucky to encounter one here. Su Len seriously sized up the spearman in front of him. He was tall and muscular, and looked very well proportioned. His expression was solemn, and his gaze was firm. His posture was also very standard, giving people a feeling of steadiness and steadiness. "What's your name?" Su Len asked. "Occam," the soldier replied. Su Len nodded and continued, "Your command just now was excellent. You have proven your bravery and military talent. I am going to appoint you as a general. Are you willing to pledge your loyalty to me and fight for me?" A hint of surprise appeared on Occam's face, but it quickly disappeared. He knelt in front of Su Len on one knee, placed his right hand on his chest, and said with a serious expression, "Lord, I, Occam, am willing to pledge my loyalty to you. I will become your sword and fight for you everywhere." As soon as he finished speaking, the system prompt sounded in Sullen's ears again. "Congratulations, host. Hero, Occam pledges his loyalty to you and requests to become your subordinate. Do you accept?" "Accept." Occam's name appeared in the hero column in the system interface. At the same time, his data also appeared in front of Su Len. Hero, Occam, loyalty, 100 race, human rank, transcendent rank, 3 profession, warrior strength, 23 agility, 14 vitality, 21 spirit, 12 charm, 12 command, 86 characteristics, talents advanced sturdiness, intermediate fortitude, strong will, discipline, command, calm, insight, bravery, integrity, loyalty, prohibition, coldness, battle reflexes. Commander, he is an excellent commander. Under his command, the army will display stronger combat power, command +10, army combat power +10, prohibition, he hates drinking and does not allow alcohol in his army. Army discipline +15 skills, charge, shield bash, evasion, smash, cleave, hurling, boost morale, weapon mastery, hand-to-hand combat, tackle, rapid assault, defense, dual weapon mastery. Weapon proficiency, gun mastery 182, sword mastery 165, hurling 130, horsemanship 107. Looking at Occam's attributes, Su Len was quite satisfied. Although a rank 3 transcendent was not considered high among the heroes, as long as he worked hard and participated in a few battles, he would be able to advance to rank 4 very quickly. Moreover, Occam's attributes were different from Boulder's and Johnson's. He was a commander-type hero. Although Boulder and Johnson were stronger than Occam, they were the kind of heroes who charged into battle. Although these heroes were strong, they didn't know how to deploy troops or fight a war. The only hero in Northern Citadel that could hold her own was Succubus Chrissy. Moreover, Succubus Chrissy wasn't familiar with battle formations. Occam was a commander-type hero, which was very beneficial for the expansion of northern citadel. Su Len pulled out his sword and placed it on Occam's shoulder. He followed the knight's way of swearing loyalty in this world. Very good. After the ceremony, Su Len gave his sword to Occam, who was kneeling on one knee, and said in a deep voice, "From today onwards, you are the military commander of Mirror Lake City. The army of Mirror Lake City will be under your command. At the same time, you will be the governor of Mirror Lake City and will be responsible for the construction of Mirror Lake City." "Yes, sir," Occam replied when he heard Sullen's appointment. Appointing Occam as the governor of Mirror Lake City was only a temporary measure. In Sullen's mind, the military and administrative forces of a city were two completely different lines. The military was only responsible for training troops and fighting, while the administrative forces were responsible for developing the city. The two sides cooperated with each other or restrained each other to form a balance. This separation of civil and military was very necessary. If there were no such restrictions, when there were more territories and more generals, there would be no restrictions. Those generals might very well become local tyrants. Although these people had declared their loyalty to Su Len, their descendants might not. In order to prevent the emergence of such separatist forces, Su Len had banned them from the route. However, the situation now was a bit special. Su Len did not have enough manpower. When the officer training base in Northern Citadel was upgraded, a better training system would be established. Then, qualified officers would be trained. When that time came, Occam's power would be taken back and his position would be changed. In the future, Su Len would also confer nobles. In this world, before you had the power to break the rules, it was best to follow the rules of this world. Although the aristocratic system had many shortcomings, it was very suitable for this era. Of course, Su Len was not like other countries where the nobles had absolute authority in their fief. Everything in the fief was controlled by the nobles. This was impossible. The nobles in Su Len were like hereditary military commanders. They had their own army, but they did not have the right to govern the fief. The right to govern the fief belonged to the country. The taxes in the fief were also equally distributed by the country and the nobles. Although the fief was nominally ruled by the lord of a city, the lord did not control all the wealth in the city. There were free people, merchants, and ordinary civilians in the city. These people owned land and houses. The wealth belonged to these people. Although it belonged to the lord in name, the lord only owned a part of the land or manor. It was impossible for the lord to own all the land. In Sullen's rules, the nobles owned manors, castles, mansions, and knights. However, the army that protected the city had to be owned by the country. The nobles could only keep their own private army. At the same time, all the land except the fief of the lord belonged to the duchy. The free people and merchants were also citizens of the duchy. The laws in the fief were the same as those in the duchy. In other words, the nobles could keep their wealth, but the management of the city, political power, and laws belonged to the duchy. Of course, the nobles could also hold positions in the duchy. Their status as nobles did not affect these positions. As for the sudden change from the feudal lord's fief system to the feudal county centralization system, Su Len had considered it. Although he had the system, the loyalty in the system could not be locked to the maximum value. Only those who used the self-created hero template could be locked to it. Once he implemented the county system, the nobles who did not get enough benefits would definitely not be willing. After all, being a local tyrant or a local rich man, as long as one was not stupid, one would know which choice was better. At that time, there would even be defections. After all, the surrounding countries were all fief systems. Therefore, Su Len decided to centralize the power in this way. In fact, Su Len did not care much about the wealth. What he cared about was the population and land. The foundation of a country was built on the population and land. Sulan had also studied the fief system in Florence and the surrounding countries. Although the fief system made the nobles the local tyrant in the fief, they still had to pay taxes to the nobles one level above them. Under normal circumstances, it was half. Of course, the lord's own property belonged to him. These taxes would be divided step by step and finally go to the king. In this way, as long as there were no problems, the king would always be the most powerful. Of course, in this extraordinary world, there were many changes. For example, the appearance of a legend. In fact, the law of this world was still the law of the jungle. After inspecting the progress of Mirror Lake City, Sulan handed the development plan of Mirror Lake City to Occam. Then he returned to North City with the army. Chapter 280. On the way back to Northern Town, Sulan went to Centaur City. Centaur City was very big. 70% of the population were centaurs while the remaining 30% were humans. Compared to Mirror Lake City, Centaur City was much simpler. There were more livestock pens here. Centaurs were good at breeding, but they weren't good at farming. Outside of Centaur City, there was a large grassland. Aside from cattle and sheep, it was also where North Town's military horses were produced. North Town had 6,000 to 7,000 soldiers, but they had more than 20,000 war horses. Currently, all the soldiers in Northern Town were mounted infantry. Some of the soldiers could even fight on horseback. For example, some of the half-elves could already easily shoot from horseback. Compared to humans, the half-elves were a bit weaker. After all, the half-elves were born with high agility. Moreover, there were druids among the half-elves, so they could communicate with animals more easily. The centaurs used to be a nomadic tribe, but now they were semi-nomadic. With Centaur City, the centaur herders would return to Centaur City every once in a while to buy all kinds of supplies. In the past, the centaur tribe would have a large number of livestock freeze to death during winter. Moreover, there was no food during winter, so many livestock would starve and lose their fat. Every winter was very difficult for the centaurs. Now that Centaur City was here, these problems were no longer a problem for them. Centaur City blocked out the wind and snow in the Northern Town. Honeycomb coal was now widely used in Northern Town. The Lord's Castle, Sulan, had also extravagantly installed floor heating. Centaur City was the same. All the livestock pens were equipped with coal stoves and chimneys. It was very safe for the livestock to spend the winter here. They didn't have to worry about orcs or gnolls robbing them, nor did they have to worry about the livestock freezing to death. In the past, the Northern Town City was researching silage. Sulan didn't raise livestock in his past life, but he had heard of silage before. However, he didn't know much about it. He only knew the name and some of the steps, but he didn't know how to make it. Therefore, he could only let the druids research according to the little information that Sulan had provided. These druids had already made some progress, but they still needed to use some nature spells to make silage. This wasn't a problem for the druids, but it would be hard to spread it. After all, there weren't many people who knew nature spells, so not many spellcasters would do this. In addition to silage, Northern Town City also provided large amounts of grain. In Centaur City, there were veterinarians, merchants, and even people who were good at farming. There were also tax officials. All livestock transactions were limited to Centaur City, which made it easier to collect taxes. Northern Town City now had another job, and that was to collect wool. Not long ago, the half-elves in Northern Town City researched wool weaving technology. Now, Northern Town City could weave wool, silk, linen, cotton, and several other kinds of cloth. However, besides linen, the production of the other kinds of cloth wasn't high. The centaur's annual income from raising livestock was very good, so the centaur's lives were much better than before. After all, in the centaur tribe, only the centaur chieftain could enjoy a good life. The other centaurs were no different from the orcs. Salt, clothes, weapons, tea, pottery, wine, and sugar were all things that the centaurs couldn't produce. Now that they had joined the northern battlefront city, these things could be easily bought with a bit of money. Although the centaurs still had a lot of power, it would be very difficult to make them betray the northern battlefront city. The centaurs at the bottom of the hierarchy didn't want to go back to their previous lives. It was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but it was hard to go from extravagance to frugality. This wasn't just a saying. In the past, no one had enjoyed a city that sheltered them from the wind and rain. They had delicious food, warm clothes, and their own property. This was simply impossible in the past. Now that the centaurs were asked to give up on this life and go back to their previous life, the centaurs at the bottom wouldn't agree. This was also done deliberately by Sulen. His method was completely open. Even if the centaur chieftain knew about it, they couldn't blame him or stop him. Using this method, Sulen firmly tied the centaur tribe to northern town city. Sulen didn't have the intention to completely annex the centaur tribe. He just wanted the centaurs to become a vassal of northern town city. Looking at the current results, it was quite good. Mission was still supportive of the centaur tribe's change. Before this, the centaur tribe liked to rob. They had 4 legs and could run very fast. Their arrows were very accurate, and they were very powerful. This made the centaurs the most famous robbers in the wilderness. At that time, the centaurs didn't want to trade at all. Later on, they had a conflict with the beastmen tribes. Under the pressure of the beastmen tribes, the centaurs began to trade on a small scale. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that they traded with the humans and received all kinds of supplies, the centaurs would have already declined in the conflict with the beastmen tribes. Of course, the centaurs suffered heavy casualties because they were too careless. When Sulen arrived at Centaur City, the city was in the middle of a cattle and sheep trade. The centaur tribe's cattle and sheep were currently monopolized by northern town city. Of course, when the number of cattle and sheep was increased, it would gradually be open to other caravans. This time, there weren't many cattle and sheep to be traded. It wasn't the season for cattle and sheep to be sold. "Welcome, Lord." The little mare Mission led many centaurs to greet him and gave him a warm hug. "How are you living here?" Sulen asked after he broke away from the 2 towering balls. "We are living very well. Just last week, the tribe welcomed a few new lives." The little mare Mission said happily. "Thank you again for your help." Sulen waved his hand and said, "No need to thank me. After all, the centaurs are now part of Northern Town City. As the Lord of Northern Town City, I have the obligation to make the lives of my people better. You are the best Lord." Led by Mission, Suluan arrived at the largest house in Centaur City. The centaur tribe did not have a chief yet. A group of centaurs sat on linen and straw mats. In the middle of the room was a huge bonfire. Several chefs were roasting lambs. Drops of fat dripped from the roasted lambs, creating clusters of flames. While the chefs were roasting the lambs, they were constantly brushing sauce on them. This method was improved by Frodo. After all, the centaurs would only dip their meat in salt before eating it. Sulen and Mission sat in the main seats. In addition to a dozen centaurs, there were also some humans. These humans were tax collectors and merchants sent by Northern Town City. Although the banquet was very simple, the atmosphere was very good. These centaurs were very satisfied with their current life. The purpose of Suluan's inspection was to see the life of the centaurs. On the other hand, he was ready to officially appoint the governor of the Centaur City. Centaur City was different from Mirror Lake City. The residents here were mainly centaurs. It was impossible to appoint a centaur to be the governor. This would make the centaurs panic, so the best candidate was Mission. However, other than the governor, more than half of the officials in the hall were humans. Especially the tax collector, the market manager, the warehouse manager, and even the city defense officer needed both humans and centaurs. The Centaur City had a group of soldiers stationed here. There weren't many people, only 100. These people were usually responsible for maintaining the security of the territory. With these people, the Centaur City wouldn't be completely controlled by the centaurs. The Centaur tribe was now under the Elder system. Under Sullen's request, the centaurs began to learn the humans' language. Under these circumstances, the centaurs in the North City gradually began to break away from their primitive tribal state and slowly entered the age of civilization. Perhaps in a few hundred years, the scholars who studied the history of the centaurs would call this the Centaurs' Age of Enlightenment. Su Len stayed in Centaur City for a day before leaving with his team and returning to the North City. The construction of the North City was still progressing steadily. As soon as they approached the North City, a cry came from the sky. Su Len looked up and saw a group of Cryopteris with a wingspan of 3 meters quickly flying over. These Cryopteris had been raised for half a year and were now past their infancy stage. Cryopteris needed 3 years to reach adulthood. Only then could they start training. He was looking forward to these Cryopteris Knights. In the last battle with the orcs, he saw the power of the Orc Wyvern Knights. If those wyverns hadn't met Alex, the 3,000 harpies would have suffered heavy casualties. The harpies could bully an army without air power, but once they met the Hippogriff Knights, Wyvern Knights, or Griffin Knights, they would suffer heavy losses. The biggest one in the sky was Sullen's Ice Quetzalcoatlus. After seeing Su Len, the Ice Quetzalcoatlus directly dived towards Su Len. The little guy flapped its wings and wanted to land on Sullen's shoulder, but it seemed to have forgotten its size. In the end, it could only land on the ground beside him. Unlike other Cryopteris, the Ice Quetzalcoatlus had a thin layer of dragon scales on its body. Although its defense was not as strong as a real dragon, it was still much stronger than an ordinary Quetzalcoatlus. Su Len rubbed its head and let the little guy play by itself. Although the little guy was less than a year old, a Euron also had a dragon's aura. Its presence scared the horses. After sending the little guy away, it took a while for the horses to recover. This also made Su Len notice the weakness of the horses. When facing the enemy cavalry on the battlefield, it seemed that the dragon's aura could directly destroy the cavalry's horse. What was the difference between a cavalry without a horse and a tiger without claws and teeth? Chapter 281. The advantage of coming to Northern Battlefront City was obvious. The knights in Northern Battlefront City were all centaurs. As intelligent beings, although they would be affected by the dragon aura, the effect was minimal. Of course, the warhorses in Northern Battlefront City would be affected as well. Su Len planned to train the warhorses accordingly so that they could slowly get used to the dragon aura. Warhorses were actually very timid animals. It would take a long time for them to get used to the dragon aura. However, Su Len was not in a hurry. After all, the warhorses in Northern Battlefront City were mostly used for quick advance or retreat. After returning to Northern Battlefront City, Su Len immediately received news from Aiden. Su Len had asked them to collect information about the Minotaurs. They had completed their mission. There are more than 300 Minotaurs in the tribe? Su Len looked at the Drow scout in surprise. Yes, sir. After careful investigation, we finally confirmed their exact number. There are about 350 of them, the Drow said respectfully. Su Len nodded. A tribe of 350 people. Are there any Minotaurs in it? Minotaurs were the name of the Minotaurs after they advanced into the legendary level. They were powerful and evil creatures. They liked to build mazes and lure their enemies into them to kill them one by one. Minotaurs were powerful and immune to mazes. Wizards' mazes were ineffective against them. They were good at using giant axes as weapons. They were cunning and evil. They were one of the monsters that adventurers did not want to encounter the most. Minotaurs were powerful and had mazes that could make people dizzy. They were very difficult to deal with. Most importantly, the rewards were very low. Unlike dragons, the Minotaurs did not like to collect treasures. Therefore, killing these monsters was often a loss. We didn't find any Minotaurs. Seems like we're in luck. This Minotaur's tribe did not give birth to such powerful creatures. Sulen held his chin with one hand and leaned back in his chair. Sir, this is the map of the Minotaur's territory. We've investigated it. There are no powerful creatures nearby. After understanding the Minotaur's strength, Sulen began to prepare to wipe out the Minotaurs. After all, not only did the Minotaurs occupy the obsidian mine, but they also captured his people. If he did not rescue them, the Grey Dwarves' loyalty would decrease. Following Sulen's orders, the war machine of northern Battlefront City began to move. Since they were going to fight in the underground world, human spearmen were not suited for the environment. Sulen planned to use Durgar, half-elf archers, centaurs, and harpies. Humans did not have night vision, so fighting in a place like the underworld was very inconvenient. In addition to these troops, Hathaway, Chris, Karina, and Alex would also go on this expedition. Without the help of spellcasters, the Taurens would suffer a lot of casualties. Adult Minotaurs could reach the level of knights. The Minotaur warriors were generally Transcendent Tier 2, and the Berserk Minotaurs were Transcendent Tier 3. The army of northern Battlefront City gathered quickly. There were 200 centaurs, 400 dwarven defenders, 300 half-elf archers, 100 barbarian warriors, and 3,000 harpies forming a huge team. Sulen led the army into the underground world through the connecting tunnel. This was not their first time in the underground world, so they quickly adapted to the environment. Under the lead of the Drow scouts, the army of northern Battlefront City advanced through the tunnels toward the Minotaur's tribe. The Minotaur's tribe was northwest of the dwarf city of Orlando. They had to pass through 5 tunnels and 3 underground caverns. The underground world's terrain was complicated, so the army moved slowly. Many of the tunnels were limited in width, so only 5 people could walk side by side. The army of northern Battlefront City was stretched into a long line. The movement of thousands of people was not small, so it naturally alerted many underground creatures. As soon as they entered the tunnel, a group of hook horrors fell from the sky. However, they could never imagine how powerful the enemy they were facing this time was. The 2-meter-tall hook horrors were shot to death in the air before they could even attack. The half-elf longbow's power could easily penetrate the armor of the dwarves at close range, so these hook horrors could block it. Moreover, the soldiers Sulen brought this time all had night vision, so those hook horrors in the dark tunnels had already been discovered by Sulen. Other than the hook horrors, there was also a group of lion-scorpion beasts living in the underground caverns. When these lion-scorpion beasts noticed the army, they immediately hid. The lion-scorpion beasts were very intelligent, so they naturally knew how to avoid danger. Sulen recorded the positions of these lion-scorpion beasts. He was prepared to see if he could tame these lion-scorpion beasts in the future. The lion-scorpion beasts were also flying mounts. Although they couldn't compare to the pterosaur, they were not any worse than the hippogriff knights and griffin knights. However, taming the lion-scorpion beasts was very difficult. Moreover, these beasts' tails could move, so the knights were worried that the lion-scorpion beasts would use their stingers to attack. After passing through an underground tunnel, the army of northern Battlefront City finally arrived near the Minotaur's tribe. Sulen didn't immediately attack, so he let the army rest. He took out the sky illuminating lamp and released a group invisibility spell. A gray energy barrier enveloped the army of northern Battlefront City, and in the next second, the army of northern Battlefront City disappeared without a trace. All the soldiers began to rest. Traveling for a long time was very tiring, not to mention in a place like the underground world. The army didn't light a fire and they were very close to the Minotaur's tribe. If they lit a fire to cook, it would attract the attention of the minotaurs. The army had brought rations with them. These rations were made by Su Len from his previous world. He used dried meat, flour, potatoes, salt, sugar, vegetable oil, and diced vegetables to make stir-fried noodles before processing them into biscuits. It can be soaked in water or eaten directly. These rations had a rough texture and the taste was not bad. Of course, according to Frodo, this was a complete waste of food, but for the army, this kind of food was very convenient. The biscuits made from stir-fried noodles were very convenient to eat. There were vegetables, salt, and diced meat inside. Not only could it fill one's stomach, it could also provide vitamins. Of course, only Northern Battlefront City would spend so much effort on rations. The rations of other countries in this world were a mess. Black bread was the norm, and sometimes they didn't even have this kind of black bread mixed with wood shavings and stones. Of course, the treatment of the elite army was very good. Northern Battlefront City's rations were not cheap, and only Su Len was rich enough to add diced meat, sugar, and vegetable oil. The cost of a single serving of rations was 2 gold nars. The army set up camp in the invisibility barrier and quietly ate the rations. After eating the rations, the army quickly took the time to rest. After the army set up camp, the drows all left to investigate the surroundings. There was no difference between day and night in the underworld. The creatures here slept according to their unique method of timing. The drows used magic pillars. Every day, the magic pillars would slowly light up from the lowest point, which meant the beginning of the day. When all the pillars lit up, it meant the end of the day, and then the magic pillars would begin to extinguish from the bottom to the top. The dwarves used mechanical timing, and at the same time, they also had magic pillars similar to the drows. Su Len didn't know the Tauren's timing tool, but he knew that it was now daytime. Su Len, who had night vision, was not affected by the darkness of the underworld. He took out a monocular made of transparent crystal. Su Len stood there and clearly saw the situation in the Tauren camp in the distance. These Taurens had just finished a hunt and were enjoying their food. Although they were far away, Su Len could still see that their prey was an underground salamander. The underground salamander was also a little overlord in the underworld, but now it had become food for the Taurens. An underground salamander was about 5 meters long. If you removed the tail that occupied half of its body would be 2 or 3 meters long. This kind of underground creature had a fierce temperament. Even the manticore didn't like to provoke them, but the drows would domesticate these underground salamanders as mounts. The strongest drows were the petrifying lizard knights, but they were rare. Generally, a petrifying lizard knight would lead a small team of underground salamander knights to form a patrol team. The underground salamanders were slightly smaller than the petrifying lizards, but they didn't have the petrifying light of the petrifying lizards. Seeing the Taurens barbecuing food, Su Len didn't continue to pay attention. When he returned to the tent, Su Len, Hathaway, Chris, and the others also began to enjoy the food. Time passed by, and soon it was night in the underworld. At this time, many animals began to come out to look for food. The camp in the northern city was still silent. A few wildebeests quickly disappeared after approaching. The Tauren tribe in the distance also quieted down. Only the tall totem pillars were still shining. Su Len waited until midnight before he began to move. 3,000 harpies flew into the sky, and Hathaway cast 2 spells to remove sound and smell. Then the group of harpies began to approach the Tauren tribe. Su Len led the dwarves in formation and began to quietly approach the camp. The half-elf archers behind him were ready. Soon, the harpies arrived above the Tauren tribe. They were very familiar with this kind of air attack. With a command, a large number of Molotov cocktails fell from the sky, and the Tauren tribe became a sea of fire in the blink of an eye. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.